I once arrived at a building site. We'll leave out the part of the story where it was at my house. But I arrived at a building site, and there was a man where a wall had collapsed on him. And he was still trapped underground in a trench, probably 2 meters below ground level in a trench, and a wall had collapsed, and he was pinned up to his waist on this. By the time I got there, he wasn't in much pain. He was in a moderate amount of pain, but because the soil was holding him and compressing him, he was okay. The problem is he was in an incredible amount of danger. There was still wall above him. He was 2 meters below the ground, and there was still wall above him. At any stage, which had already half collapsed, the rest of it could have come down on him, and he would have lost his life. And so his two friends had realized the danger that he was in, and they were working, all of us were working as hard as we could and as fast as we could to try and free him, digging, and then pulling, digging and pulling. As we got closer, digging a little bit closer to him and started trying to move him, the pain suddenly went from a 3 to a 10. He was screaming, please stop. What had actually happened was he'd broken both of his femurs. The top two bones in his legs, he had broken both of them. While he was held still in the sand, it was compressed and held together. He wasn't moving. He was in a moderate amount of pain. As soon as his friends started trying to move him, the pain, obviously now, he was being released from being held by the sand, and that pain increased. He was saying, please stop what you're doing. It is so sore, I actually can't take it. His friends are now in a position where, what do? Do they listen to their friends saying, stop hurting me, in which case he might die, or do they hurt their friend in order to save his life and get him out? It's not a nice, if you've ever been in that situation, it's not a nice situation to be in. It's got a happy ending. We got him out and we got him to hospital and the legs were set. Actually, thanks to one of the doctors in our church, he was able to look on her phone and see a whole bunch of things, and his legs were set. But we've been speaking for the last couple of weeks about being convinced and compelled. And I want to speak this morning about being convinced around community, being convinced that one of the things that we should default to, one of the things that we should autopilot to, is towards community, not away from community. And you're going to see why I opened with a story about a builder getting stuck underground in a minute. In my experience, most people look for community instead of building it. But friends, here's the thing about community. It's not something that you find. Community is something that you build. If you have left another community, and perhaps for work or whatever, and you have come to this community, I want to tell you that you won't find community here. You will find people that you can build community with, but you won't find community. If you leave this community for a good reason or a bad reason, you won't find community somewhere else. You might be able to find people that you can build community with, but you won't find community. Community is not something that you just happen on. People are something that you happen on, and there are people that you can build community with and people that you can't build community with. But it has to be built, and building involves investments, it involves time, it involves a whole lot of things that are a lot more difficult and complex than simply finding something. You find a 10 rand note on the floor, but you don't find community. You have to build it, unfortunately. And so all of us, when I speak community this morning, I'm going to be really clear that I'm speaking about a community of faith, a community of believers. Acts chapter 2, when the church is born, it speaks about they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and prayer, and there was a couple of things that they devoted themselves to, and it says they were all together in one accord, the community of believers. And so we've got communities that the group of kids that you're at school with is a community, and the guys that you work with is a community, and the guys you go and hang out in the pub with is a community, and the guys you watch sport with and go cycling with, and the ladies that you have tea with, and we have little pockets of community, and all of those are good and all of those are important, but I'm not speaking about those little pieces of community this morning. I'm speaking specifically about a community of faith, a community of believers, actually the church. Because the church can be many things according to Scripture. I can make a case for the church being an army. I can make a case for the church being a body. I can make a case for the church being a family. The church, a hospital. The church is all of those things. But the church is a community. In Acts chapter 2, a community of believers. And so I want to be really clear that that's what I'm speaking about this morning. That's the lens that I want you to listen to what I'm saying this morning, not with me and my few mates. It's more than that. It's more than that. So I want to make a case, because I think that there are many people who are in the same situation as the builder and not even aware of it. We don't realize that our legs are broken because we're not moving. We think that we are secure because we are still and things are fairly comfortable. And we don't realize that the very things that we have put around us to prevent us from feeling pain are the very things that are going to cause our destruction. The very things that are holding us in place, when we've put them there so that we don't feel pain, is the very thing that's going to hold us, it's holding us in place, and we're in danger of a wall collapsing on us. So my first point in making a case for why we should be compelled to community is that it causes pain. It's a good thing. It takes short-term pain to get us out of the collapsed walls and the false sense of security and into first safety and then a process of healing. We can't get healed without getting to safety first. And to get to safety takes a moderate amount of pain. I see too many people getting angry and upset with their community, with their friends, with their family, when they cause them pain, because as humans, our tendency is to avoid pain. The things that cause us pain, we want to steer clear of those. And so when people cause us pain, when a community causes us pain, we say, rather just leave me alone. I'll go and find community somewhere else. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. We cannot avoid the pain of being pulled out with the broken legs so that we can be healed, so that we can become whole. What a community does is they move us. The goal is never to hurt somebody. The goal is always to bring people to safety and then to healing. But in order to get to safety and healing, there is often pain that's required. A community helps us push through the pain because on the other side of pain is safety and healing. So I'm not making a case this morning for people simply hurting each other. I am saying that you can't avoid necessary pain. The people that you want to build community with will cause you necessary pain. Don't run from that pain. Don't avoid that pain. Because if we try and avoid it, we're not only losing our ability, but in many cases we're losing our desire to be a community. If you're a visitor here, I want you to know that we're a church that doesn't tolerate any form of abuse. I'm not speaking about abuse this morning. As pastors, as elders, as leaders, we don't tolerate any form of abuse. But we are also a family where pain lives. We're a family where pain lives. In the leaders, pain lives in us. Not because there's something wrong with us, but because that's the price that sometimes has to be paid for a community to come into safety and then to go into healing and wholeness. The second thing that I believe, the second reason that I believe we should be compelled towards community is because community produces in us exposure. Those are the big two, right? If you're selling chocolate, you sell diabetes and heart disease. Community, pain, and exposure. We're in. Community caused exposure for the 12 men who followed Jesus. It says this in Matthew chapter 20. Then the mother of the sons of Zebedee are James and John, Jesus' two closest friends. The mother of the sons of Zebedee came to Jesus with her sons, and kneeling before him, she asked him for something, and he said to her, "What do you want?" So here's Matthew giving an account of what's taken place with Jesus and a few of his friends. And Matthew says, I saw James, John, and their mom go to Jesus and ask him for something, and instead of, what it looks like is they whispered something to Jesus, because Matthew didn't hear what it was. Jesus then says, speak up a little bit louder, what do you want? So that everybody can hear. So then she says to him, can these two sons of mine sit at your right hand and the other one at your left in your kingdom? Jesus answered, you don't know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I am to drink? And James and John answered to him, we are able. And so he said, you will drink my cup, but to sit at the right and my left is not mine to grant, but it's for those who have been prepared by my Father. And when the 10 heard it, they were indignant at the two brothers. When the 10 heard it, they were indignant at the two brothers. And James and John's mom at that point were saying, well, this is why I whispered it to you, Jesus, because I didn't want the other 10 to be upset with me. Here's what's going on. James and John, Jesus' two abangane, his mates, his two closest friends, they've got their mom to go and ask their boss for a promotion. That's literally what's taken place here. You know those people, the people who go and ask the coach if their son and daughter could captain the team this week. Those people that laugh just a little bit too long at the boss's bad jokes. You know those people. It's called underhandedness. It's called ambition. And here's the thing. Underhandedness, ambition always resided in John and James, and it always resided in the 10. And it needed a community. It needed the 12 of them for it to be exposed in them. If James and John had just sat at home with their mom, they would never have had their underhanded ambition exposed in them. If Jesus had never asked James and John's mom to repeat it, no, just say it a little bit louder so that everybody else can hear it, the 10, the rest of the disciples, wouldn't have had their ambition exposed. Why do you think they were indignant with James and John? They were upset because they didn't think of it first. Right? The kid whose parents asked to be captain of the team, you're upset with them, but partly because you should have thought of it first. Right? The rest of the disciples would never have had that exposed if they had not been in community. Peter has his anger and his cowardice exposed by being in community. If Peter had just stayed fishing with his fishing friends, he would have thought of himself as not an angry person and not a coward. And yet, because he follows Jesus with 11 other men, he has his anger and his cowardice exposed. He would never have thought of himself as that, outside of that. And the reason is that some of our worst traits, habits, and characteristics are hidden from ourselves. And it takes deep relationships to expose these things. I never thought of myself as a selfish person. And then I got married. And I thought, my wife has made me selfish. This is her fault. And then I realized, actually, what had happened was I was now in a deep relationship, and it exposed the selfishness that was actually always there all along. If I had stayed unmarried, I would never have had that selfishness exposed in me. And so it was exposed in me, and I thought, okay, I've now processed and I've dealt with this selfishness. After a year or two, I thought, cool, I'm actually doing all right. And then I had a child. And I thought to myself, this child has made me selfish. It's his fault. All that had happened was a deeper relationship had revealed a deeper level of selfishness in me. I had dealt with some of my top-level selfishness when I got married, and then a deeper level of relationship with a child had exposed a deeper layer of selfishness that was within me. And I thought, okay, cool, after a year, I've dealt with my selfishness. Now I'm the most unselfish person on earth. And then I had a second child. And you see where the story's going, right? I've got 5 children, so you must know what I've been going through for the last little while. But all that happened was that deeper relationships exposed deeper selfishness in me. Here's the key. The deeper the relationship, the deeper the exposure. And so some of us never have our worst habits, characteristics, and traits ever exposed because we don't have deep relationships. And so because they're never exposed, we never have an opportunity to deal with them. And so we have people walking around with their worst qualities. Some of them are hidden deep, and some of them are quite shallow. But we never have them exposed because we don't have deep relationships. We have a level of friends. We have a level of community with people that we see every now and again, with people that we perhaps go out and have a drink with, watch sports games with, and we sit and have tea and cake. I don't know what girls do in their spare time, but we do those things at a surface level. And because there's never any deep community, the deep wounds that are within us never get exposed. It takes an external force of us being compelled to community to allow deep relationships to form so that these things can be exposed in us. Friends, without community, we sit with a false sense of security. We have no pain, but we also have nothing being exposed. We're being held in place by sand, and we're unaware of our true condition. Our legs are broken, and our lives are in danger. Community is pain, and it is exposure, but it is worth it, friends. It is worth it. Umuntu, ngumuntu, ngabantu. A person is a person by people. A person is a person by people. Umuntu, ngumuntu, ngabantu. Community is pain and an exposure, but it is worth it. And so I've started off with pain and exposure. Let's look at a more pleasant value add of why we should be compelled towards community. Being compelled to community will add completeness to life. The same John that has his selfish ambition exposed by being with Jesus and with the community. Later in his life, he is taken up in a revelation he's taken up in a vision to heaven, and he writes the book of Revelation. God says to him, write down the things that you see, and we have the book of Revelation. And he starts off chapter 21 of the book of Revelation saying, I saw a new heaven and a new earth, indicating that there was a perfect recreation of what was always created to be perfect. A new heaven and a new earth, a perfect recreation. And it says this in verse 15 of Revelation 21. The angel who talked with me had a measuring rod of gold to measure the city, its walls and its gates. The city was laid out like a square as long as it was wide. He measured the city with a rod and found it to be 12,000 stadia in length and as wide and high as it is long. It's as wide and high as it is long. Its length is equal to its depth and its breadth. Now, if you're a mathematician, you're getting excited there. I'm not, so that doesn't excite me for a minute until I read a commentary on this around what Martin Luther King says. He comments in this passage and he says that what's remarkable about this new city is its completeness. He says equality on all fronts speaks to completeness. Equal in length, in breadth, and in height speaks to completeness. And he says our relationships should be the same. He equates the length to our relationship with ourselves, breadth to our relationship with others, and height to our relationship with God. And he says we should have equality on length, breadth, and height, our relationship to ourselves, to others, and to God. For us to live complete lives, for us to live whole lives relationally here on earth. So I'm going to go through these things really quickly, and then we're done. So length is a relationship with yourself. To have a relationship with yourself means to love yourself. And for many of us, it means to learn to love ourselves. Loving ourselves is a little bit like community. You don't just love yourself. Many of us have to learn to love ourselves. Jesus says, the greatest commandment is love the Lord your God with all of your heart, your mind, and your soul, and your strength, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. To put that the other way around, to change that language slightly, as you love yourself, so love your neighbor. As you love yourself, so love your neighbor. I think one of the reasons that so many people don't love their neighbors is because they don't love themselves. And because we've never learned to love ourselves, we never learn to love our neighbors very well. And so we have a problem. We have no length of our lives. To love yourself means to care for yourself. It means to enjoy yourself. Friends, do you enjoy your own company? If you don't enjoy your company, I can promise you that nobody else will. They might be with you, but they will endure your company. They won't enjoy your company. Until you learn to enjoy your own company, others will struggle to enjoy your company. Until you learn to love yourself, others might struggle to love you. You need to know what it is about you that is lovable. You need to learn to love yourself. We have to learn to love ourselves. To love yourself means to care for yourself, to enjoy yourself, but it also means to accept yourself. Acceptance means I accept my tools and I accept my limitations. Here's what will happen if you love yourself by accepting your tools. You will be content. When I accept that the tools that I have in my hand is enough, I will be content. I'm no longer wanting something else, right? The heart surgeon doesn't dream of becoming the best accountant. And if he does, I want another heart surgeon. That's not the guy that I want operating on me. He accepts the tools that are in his hand, and when he accepts them, when you accept the tools that are in your hand, you become content, and not only that, you will have a desire to become the best at what you do with what's in your hands. So you might not have the most tools, you might not have the sharpest tools, you might not have the newest tools, but when you accept the tools that God has placed in your hands and begin to steward them well and begin to become the best with what's in your hands, you will become content. Scripture says that godliness with contentment is great gain. So one of the ways that I learn to love myself is I accept my tools, and when I accept my tools, I become content. One of the other ways that I learn to love myself is I accept my limitations. And when I accept my limitations, I free myself from a curse. Because when I don't accept my limitations, I'm constantly comparing myself to others. And when I'm constantly comparing myself to others, I'm in this perpetual state of striving. I need more. I want more. I need to be better at this. I need to be better at that. I need more of this. I need more of that. Do you know that contentment is a dream that you will always chase unless you accept it? We speak about the statistics around contentment say that people in poorer communities are on average more content than people in wealthier communities. And the reason is because they compare themselves to each other. And so they say, I am doing okay relative to the people around me. Whereas the wealthier people say, I'm in a community of people that are far wealthier than me. Although they are far wealthier than the people who have less than them, they are less content because they're comparing themselves to the wealthier people. Chasing something else. They have not accepted their limitations, which means they are never free from the curse of striving and wanting more. I have a limit. I can only do so much. I can only get so much. I can only buy so much. I have a limit. And until I accept my limitations, I'm not saying you can't desire more in God. That's good. But until I accept my limitations, I only have 24 hours a day. I only have this, that. When I accept my limitations, I free myself from the curse of striving day after day to be something that I was never, ever created to be. Length of life is loving yourself. It's caring for, enjoying, and accepting yourself, accepting your tools and your limitations. Breadth of life is loving others. It's your relationship with others. When Jesus is talking with one of the teachers of the law comes to him and says, what is the greatest commandment? And Jesus flips it on him and he says, you're a teacher of the law. Why don't you tell me what the greatest, you know the law. What does the law say? So the Pharisee answers him and he says, the greatest commandment is love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, your soul, your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. So Jesus says to him, you've answered that correctly. You understand the law. You've got the good theory. He says to him, now all you got to do is go and do that. Just do it. What's the first question the Pharisee asks him? Who's my neighbor? So if my salvation depends on loving my neighbor as myself, who's my neighbor? What he's actually asking is, what is the least amount of people that I can get away with loving and still be saved? That's what he's asking. And we actually ask the same question of God regularly. What is the least that I can do and still consider myself a Christian? What's the least that I can do relationally and still be a part of a community and still be considered that? And if that's the first question you're asking, friends, it's the wrong question. That's the wrong question to ask. What's the least? A man called G.K. Chesterton, who's an author, says this, that the Bible tells us to love our neighbors, and Jesus tells us Jesus says, love your neighbors and love your enemies. And Chesterton says, most likely because those are normally the same people. Love your neighbors and love your enemies because generally they are the same people. Here's what will happen if you begin to love both your neighbors and your enemies well. You will begin to heal. So we know that the only way to get healing from relational wounds is in relationship. We know this. We see it all the time. We do it. The problem for so many of us is that we seek out relational health in unhealthy relationships, and we wonder why we're not getting relationally any healthier. It's the relational equivalent of trying to get fit by eating McDonald's every day. We know that we have to have relational healing, but we seek it out in unhealthy relationships and then wonder why we're perpetuating the cycle of unhealthy relationships because there's no health. The only way to heal from relational wounds is in healthy relationships. Some of humanity's deepest wounds come from our relationships. Your mother, your father, your family, a failed marriage, a failed relationship, a toxic friendship. That's why I think it's so tragic when people who have been regularly hurt put up walls around themselves to say, I've put these walls up around myself so that I won't get hurt again. I'll keep myself in the sand, trapped at the bottom, so that I don't get any pain. Not realizing that the very walls that we've put up to keep us from being hurt again are keeping us hurt. Not realizing that the very walls we've put up to keep us healthy are keeping us unhealthy. It's a tragedy, friends. When you love your neighbor and your enemy, you will begin to heal relationally, and you will add breadth to your life. We want length, relationship with ourselves. We want breadth, relationship with others. We have to move beyond self-interest and beyond humanity and reach up to love God. Charles Spurgeon says this: if you live from a Monday morning to a Saturday night in the same way that you would live as if there was no God, you are a practical atheist. If you live from a Monday morning to a Saturday night, excluding a Sunday, because you come to church and we're all Christians when we come to church. So if you live from a Monday morning to a Saturday night in the same way that you would live as if there was no God, you are a practical atheist. So you might not be a theoretical atheist. You might say that in theory there is a God, and in theory I love him. But the way that you live your life would indicate that you're a practical atheist. You live your life practically as if there was no God. And the problem with this is that we've been speaking about being convinced and compelled and persuading others and making every effort and stretching our spheres and reaching out to others. But when we don't love God well, when we live as practical atheists, our lives lack credibility. We have no credibility. There's no height to our relationship. We have two-dimensional relationships with ourselves and with others. And when there's no third dimension to our relationships, our lives lack credibility. Loving God well will add credibility to your life. Because when you learn to love God well, you begin to live as He wants you to live. When you live how He wants you to live, you have integrity. To have integrity means that what I believe, what I say I believe, and what I truly believe, and how I think, speak, and act line up. There's a line between what I believe and what I think, say, and do. If there is a disconnect between those things, if I come on a Sunday and I sing songs and I say I believe this one thing, and yet I live Monday to Saturday as if I believe something else, my life lacks integrity. And the people that have the most credibility are not the smartest people. The people that have the best credibility are not the influencers. The people that have credibility are those that have integrity. And if I have no integrity in my life, I will never have credibility because I have not loved God well. So there's a trampoline park, if you don't have small children, there's a trampoline park called Bounce. Now, I don't think they spend much of their marketing budget on the name. I think it's a bit of an average name, Bounce. Like if it was me, I was calling it Bouncy Trancy or Bouncer and Trancer. That's just me. It could be better. If you don't know what it is, that's okay. It's essentially a big warehouse full of trampolines that you jump on. Now, that excites some of you and it scares others of you. Just imagine for a second that you were 25 years old and your body was fully healthy, okay? Just put yourself in that position. If you were in that position and it was a cool of the night and you were alone in a warehouse full of trampolines, what would you do? Would you just jump on one trampoline to see how high you could get? Would you jump forwards to see how many trampolines you could jump on? Is that the only thing that you would do? Is the only thing that you would do to jump sideways to see how far you could jump on the trampoline? If you had a whole night, a healthy body, and it was cool. I think I would do all three. I think I'd probably still do all three now, although I'm not very healthy in my body. But I think I would still do all three right now. All right? I want length, I want breadth, and I want depth. That is the complete trampolining experience, is all three of those things. Friends, we have to have community will be painful. To invest in a community will cause us pain. To build a community, not to find a community, but to build a community will cause us pain. It will expose things in us that could have stayed hidden if I stayed in by myself at home. That's okay, I can stay at home. It's not okay. I can stay at home and never have those things exposed. It's not nice to have them exposed, but they will never be exposed unless I build and invest in a community. I will have no pain and no exposure, but I will also not have completeness of life. A community adds length, depth, and breadth to my life. It speaks of completeness, wholeness of life. And I want all three, friends. Here's what I'm asking you to do this week. One thing, two things actually. One of two things. First of all, ask for help. If you are struggling in any of the areas that I've spoken about today, I want you to reach out and ask for help. Secondly, I want you to take one step out of your comfort zone. I'm not asking you to be unwise. I'm not asking you to violate your faith or your conscience, but I'm asking you to take one step out of your comfort zone. Here's the beautiful thing about one step out of your comfort zone. Everybody can take one step. So whether you on the social scale are an 8 out of 10 or a 1 out of 10, everybody can take one step. All right? Sometimes the 8s need to take a step to go to 7. for the sake of a community. I'm not asking the ones to go to a 7. I'm asking the ones to go to a 2. Sometimes the zeros need to go to a 1. But I'm asking all of us this morning to take one step out of your comfort zone and towards a community, towards building a community that you know will cause some pain, some exposure, but will lead to completeness of life.